Today's video is sponsored by CS Stationery. CS Stationery is a small business based out of Caerphilly County Borough. You can get all kinds of stationery such as pens, notebooks and diaries and bundles. The bundles you can purchase are themed, so if you're a fan of Harry Potter or all things vintage, CS Stationery is for you. I have these stamps by here, so you can see some of them are themed to be like travel. You can see that's got Budapest on it, and these are the stamps I have purchased. I've got art on them, so you can see Vincent van Gogh is on there, and also you've got the Mona Lisa on the other side. I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet. I'm probably going to make like a little notebook out of them, but yeah, that's the sort of things you can purchase on CS Stationery. If you do like to have a look on CS Stationery and if you want to purchase something, the Facebook link is on screen now and also down below in the description. I do highly recommend it. The stuff there is good because I've literally seen a lot of their stuff lately and it's good quality, it's not cheap or nasty looking, it is proper top of the range stuff. So if you do want to purchase off CS Stationery, follow the link down below. So let's get into today's case. Hello, welcome back to another episode of True Crime Cases, and today I will be looking at the murders committed by Bible John, the Barrowlands killer. This is occurred in Glasgow in the 1960s, so it's going to be an interesting one. And yeah, so all I can say is just let's get into it. And before I continue, this will be the last episode I'm directly going to be reading from a script, because it's not that great reading from a script, and also I didn't have enough time to learn these to film this video, so let's just get into it. Just because we don't know really much about this man, I'm just going to give you a little brief of what Glasgow used to be like in the 1960s. Glasgow was facing a decline in the post-war era and in the early 60s. But like most things in the 60s, massive change was seen in culture and the way of living, with the city council building new tower blocks and houses to destroy the slums and tenements. Gang violence was also high during this time. Just interject quickly from what I've written. What's that most famous gang from Glasgow? They were Protestant. They all support Rangers. They were in Peaky Blinders. Oh, I think it's the Billy Boys. Yeah, it's the Billy Boys, isn't it? Because obviously Rangers got their own version of the song. But yeah, they were brutal. They were absolutely brutal. But interjection over. Glasgow was also a party town during the decades, with the ballrooms and the likes of the Barrowlands dotted around the city. So the Barrowlands was known for couples mainly, but a Thursday night was known as a grab granny night, where singles would almost pick up someone, go home with, have sex, and etc, etc. Maybe form relationships, you never know. But this sort of setting was where the killer hunted for his prey around the city. Not really around the city, but in the Barrowlands. So we know what Glasgow was like, so let's get into the first murder. The first murder occurred on the 23rd of April 1968, with the naked body of 25-year-old auxiliary nurse Patricia Docker in a lane near a garage in the Battlefield area of Glasgow. Docker was married to Corporal Alex Docker, who was based in RAF Digby in Lincolnshire, England. The police were very slow reacting to the reports, and they thought the naked woman was a homeless woman, with the police not taking it seriously and sending traffic officers to the scene. And you know, when this happened, the scene wasn't unsecure and people trampled all over it. So everything was contaminated before even the investigation got started. And this early stages of the Bible John story and case is a lot similar The stuff was just getting trampled over, no care in the world was given, and crime scenes are getting contaminated, and this is probably one of the reasons why this man hasn't been identified. But it took a whole hour until detectives arrived on the scene. At this point, they secured the scene and treated it as a murder. But again, evidence was tampered, and they couldn't definitely try and get DNA to identify who this man could be. Docker's body bore blunt force trauma, particularly to the face and the head. She'd been strangled to death with a strong ligature and possibly a belt. Docker's handbag, watch and clothes were missing. Her clothes was never found, and after the post-mortem, it discovered that Docker was menstruating. And that is a really key detail you've got to remember during this video, because menstruation does play a part in this case massively. And also, if you're not familiar with what menstruation means, it's basically being on your period. So this is a big key factor you need to remember about this case. So the police started doing door-to-door inquiries, interviews, whatsoever, just to try and get a picture of the scene in the battlefield area of Glasgow. One woman stated on a door to one of the detectives that she could hear a woman screaming that night, "Leave me alone," but did nothing. Also, her family was interviewed, and her mother claimed that Docker was going to the Barrowlands Ballroom. Barrowlands Ballroom was searched by the police, and staff and patrons were interviewed, and they did come up with a description of a man that she was seen with. Obviously, the picture of Docker was shown to these people, which a lot of them who are regulars recognised her. The man had ginger hair. He was tall, considerably handsome. He was neat in appearance. He wore a nice suit, and he was aged between 25 to 35. But one distinctive thing about this man they discovered, that his two front teeth overlapped, and this was a key thing on finding Bible John. So the police took this, filed it, and ultimately tried to carry on with the investigation with a lack of evidence. Obviously, with this being unsolved and the killer still at large, tragedy would inevitably strike again. And this would happen on the 17th of August 1968, when a mother of two, Jemima MacDonald, went to the Barrowlands Ballroom on the evening of the 16th. At the Barrowlands, she met a man who was tall, handsome, had ginger hair, neat in appearance, and possibly two overlapping teeth. Jemima was last seen on the 17th at 12:40 AM because she left the Barrowlands bang on at midnight, and then people started getting worried that she didn't come home. Her sister started finding out if anyone knows where Jemima is, and then a horrible rumour which no one ever wants to hear started going around. A group of children started saying that there was a body in an abandoned tenement in McKeith Street. Fearing for the worst and hoping that it is untrue, Jemima's sister went to investigate. And upon discovering this in the abandoned tenement, she saw the battered and bruised body of Jemima out on the floor. Her body was battered and bruised, mainly from punch marks to the face. And I mean, by what I'm not including in this, because this is detailed as heck. It was absolutely battered the face, and possibly could have went on if he went on longer beyond recognition. She was fully clothed when she was found, and she had strangulation marks on her neck, but one thing about her being fully clothed, her underclothing was torn. So investigators wanted to know if Jemima was raped upon her death. And the post-mortem did conclude that Jemima was raped upon her death. She did not bear a lot of similarities to the first murder, but she did have some similarities. The fact that she was fully clothed and not naked was one big thing. and also the rape is a different part of it. When a killer does start doing his spree or serial killings, you can see an escalation. A part of his modus operandi escalates. Like Jack the Ripper, his first murder possibly was Martha Tabram. He stabbed her multiple times to his last murder, which was Mary Kelly, which he absolutely destroyed her body and tore her apart. So that is a common theme, that the escalations of violence happens. So without her being naked, that the rape is a clear acceleration of violence. But another key detail, like I said, remember, she was also menstruating at the time. So that's one thing that the picture will show in a very, very short second. The initial investigation didn't start near a year after the first two murders, but the Glasgow police didn't take it serious. Of course, a neat looking guy who is probably come from a good background, works a really good job, isn't what Glasgow police will look at. So it was ultimately practically shelved, the investigation. But he would strike again on Halloween night 1969, when the body of Helen Puttock was found in Scotstoun area of Glasgow. She was only a couple of streets away from an Earl Street flat. Her body was found by a drain pipe. It was discovered that she was also raped, similar to Jemima MacDonald, and she did put an incredible force to fight back. She was also punched severely in the face, and her body was battered and bruised. And talking about the fight back, she had scratch marks onto her nails, which obviously damaged her nails, and she had bruises on her arm. This is what the police report did say. A bite mark was found on the upper right thigh, which was deep. Helen's body was found with a sanitary towel at her feet, placed there by the murderer, which a post-mortem revealed that she was also menstruating. But also another key detail I have to turn the page for is by here, that she did try and climb a railway embankment, but obviously that was sadly unsuccessful, where she was trying to flee from the killer itself. Following this, her husband was interviewed by the police, and it was confirmed that Helen and her sister Jean Langford went to the Barrowlands Ballroom, and then they actually decided to connect all the dots, which is a bit late, and then the investigation seriously picked up pace. Helen's sister Jean was interviewed, and she described the man to the same detail, and I mean literally to the same detail that the detectives asked a fellow arts teacher, an arts teacher at Glasgow University, to draw an image of the killer, and then the image was composed. The police did a press conference announcing that an investigation has been started on the killer, and they have a sketch of him, and he was revealed for the first time. Because this was quite a normal looking and average gentleman, that really frightened people of Glasgow and Scotland and even the United Kingdom. Because he was so average and normal looking, he could be amongst anyone. So the police interviewed over hundreds of men in the Glasgow area and interviewed Jean Langford more. Dogs barking. After further interviews to Jean, she revealed that there were two men with her sister in a bar opposite the Barrowlands Ballroom, where they obviously had pre-drinks. This man was called John, and the murderer was also called John, as we know. So they finally had a name. The John that left early was from the Castle Milk area of Glasgow, but the one who is the murderer also gave his name. This man called himself John Templeton, or also Jean was a little bit confused or couldn't understand the man, so she got Templeton, Stempleton or Emerson. And the bizarre thing that the police found out off Gene that he quoted a lot of Bible references. And this was a massive breakthrough in the case of the criminal profile of the murderer, as he quoted Bible references and it could narrow down the list of suspects. And also a possible witness in the John from Castlemilk. They started looking in the area for people called John who might know who this is. Even though this is unsuccessful, it still garnered public interest and people came forward. But Helen's sister left the ballroom for a taxi with also Helen and this John, whatever his last name may be. Helen got into the taxi and in it he got agitated and angry and frustrated, also referencing the Bible a lot. Helen's sister Jean left the taxi first, leaving the two, and then the taxi parked a couple of blocks away from Helen's house in Earl Street, and that's where we know what happened after that occurred. He might have walked her down the street a little bit, giving her a bit of the comfort that she was safe with this man, but ultimately it is a tragic story. With the investigation well underway and the Glasgow police looking for suspects based off Jean's descriptions, now let's look back over who Bible John's criminal profile is. Like I said, he was a gingered, neat looking man. He was tall, he was handsome, but the key distinction with him, he had overlapping teeth. His face was very similar to mine, I would say, in having more of a shaped face. He quoted a lot of Old Testament Bible quotes, and that's a big thing because I just said he quoted Bible, but the Old Testament. He didn't talk much about sport or nothing, so they deduced that he can be distinguished as Catholic or Protestant, which is a key thing in Glasgow. If you don't know, Catholic and Protestants are at war. The Billy Boys were Protestant, then you had the Fenian Catholics. And this also boiled over into football, with the Catholic side of Celtic and the Protestant side of Rangers, which culminates into the old firm derby, and that's one of the most brutal derbies. So this had to be narrowed down, but they couldn't distinguish which side he was on. So a list of suspects, over hundreds of suspects, was compiled. I'm only going to look at a few of them, and again I'll be reading off the script for this one because I've actually got a lot of detail into these. Suspect number 1 is John Irving McGuinness, who was a suspect at the time in 1996. Strathclyde police exhumed his body and they basically ran DNA tests off him. McGuinness who served in the Scots Guard at the time of the murders, committed suicide in 1980 at the age of 41. This was because he wanted I can't speak now. His body was exhumed because they wanted to test his DNA on the stockings of Helen Puttock. But as DNA tests go lately with previous murders in historical sense, it came back as inconclusive and he could not be proven to be the killer. Suspect number 2, John White. One former chief detective, or chief inspector, Les Brown, then working for the Strathclyde Police, has supplied current investigators with details of the arrest of a suspect conducted in 1969, which believes who was extremely likely to be the perpetrator, but was dismissed simply because he didn't have the notably overlapping teeth. And this one is where they threw the man in the van, and one of the police officers went, no, he can't be the killer. He didn't have the overlapping teeth, which is excruciating, because that could be a key detail that was wrong. But as we go along, it was believed that John White was arguing with a young woman in the Barrowlands. He was arrested and had to be released due to the fact there was no evidence against him, just because he looked a little bit like the sketch, which is it is excruciating that they didn't look into this more just because of his teeth. That is police incompetency at its finest. Suspect number 3 is the Hannah Martin rapist. In April 1969, Hannah Martin went to the Barrowlands Ballroom. She met this man, a tall, handsome man who possibly had ginger hair and overlapping teeth as well, and neat appearance. They started talking, and eventually they left the Barrowlands Ballroom. She went back to this man's place and they had sex, which, if he is Bible John, is very, very different from his modus operandi. She was very drunk and he was fairly sober, and he offered to drive Hannah home. But when they were on the drive home, his sexual demeanour got more violent and aggressive, and Hannah started feeling uncomfortable. So she vomited in his car to the point where the man kicked out the car and left her to find her own way home. But a year later, Hannah had a baby, and she claimed that the father is Bible John from this night. Although this can't be investigated and DNA tests have literally nothing to prove it, this has gone pretty much nowhere. But it's key to put her in here because it could be a different angle which the murderer might have took. And the final suspect, which is my favourite suspect, is Peter Tobin. He is a convicted murderer who fits the profile of Bible John, apart from the ginger hair. He's a dark-haired man, Peter Tobin. Following the final murder, Tobin moved from Scotland to Brighton. Two Tobin's aliases are called John Tobin and Paul Semple, which really bears similarities to the Simpleton, wherever it could be. And he looks, like I said, very much similar to the sketch. Peter Tobin did commit 2 murders while in Brighton of 2 young women, or 2 young girls, children to be precise. But the problem is Tobin, DNA tests did rule him out. So he isn't completely linked. They are trying to see if he is still linked, because the police are very much certain that he is Bible John. But if you do add up all the factors and look into Peter Tobin a bit more, yeah, I think he is the killer himself. Just very lucky he isn't being prosecuted for it, even though he is serving a life sentence currently. Because we now may never know who Bible John is. This could be Glasgow and Scotland's greatest unsolved mystery. He was a sadistic, violent, and possibly could be an unpredictable man. Glasgow was a violent city, as we discovered at the start of the video, but this went beyond it. This scared the core of the city. This scared the core of Scotland and the United Kingdom, that such an average looking normal man could do this. We don't know who Bible John is. It could be John Irving McGuinness, John White, or possibly Peter Tobin. But he could be dead, he could be walking the streets, or he could be in prison. You may never know. He could be amongst us, my fellow viewers, or he could be watching. Some things we may never know or never discover. So that is the case of Bible John, the Barrowlands killer. I hope you enjoyed this episode of True Crime Places and you are interested in viewing more episodes. Please hit the subscribe button, and if you did like the video, please give it a thumbs up and possibly give me feedback in the comments. The next true crime case will be the murder of Dr. Crippen, or the murder committed by Dr. Crippen, which is going to be, the episode's going to be called Dr. Crippen Murder in Holloway. That will be coming very shortly, and obviously I will be doing that exploring video in Morales Castle next week, which I will be recording it and possibly bring her out at the end of that week. And also I have got another channel as well. It's called Weird Stuff Production, which I'll be doing little like promo stuff for people and little films. My documentaries will be going over to that as well. So if you want to hit that, subscribe, I'll be putting that also in the link below. And yeah, I'll see you for the next True Crime Places. See you soon, guys.